Good evening. Welcome to the March 29th, 6 p.m. business meeting of the Indian River County School Board. At this time, I would like to call the meeting to order, and I would like to ask you all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and will be led by Board Member Sean Frost.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Frost.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Be seated. Thank you all for coming. I know it's raining out, so I appreciate your attendance. Right now, we're going to request an adoption for the orders of the day, and I ask the board members if you have any items that you wish to move from consent to discussion. Mr. Searcy.
Item B of consent to action for discussion, please.
Consent B to action. Any others? I have a motion. Approval. Thank you, Ms. Jimenez. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. McCain. All those in favor?
Aye.
At this time, we have presentations. Dr. Rendell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a Casual for a Cause presentation scheduled for today, but we've had to move that. The recipient could not be here tonight, so we'll do that in the April 12th board meeting. We do have a special presentation, a musical rendition from students from Fellsmere Elementary School, so I'd ask the board members to join me in the audience so we can get their best perspective.
And keeping with our new tradition of kicking off each business meeting with a musical performance, I'd like to introduce Sarah DePardo, the Fellsmere music teacher. Sarah.
Good evening, everybody. We are so excited to be here tonight to perform for you guys. All of our music is going to be very upbeat and cheerful, so I really hope you get excited about this meeting. Our first song is actually interactive, so if you would like to participate, that'd be fantastic. There are directions in the song. It'll tell you to stand up, sit down, stand up, turn around, turn back, sit down, stand up, sit down. And the kids will help you along the way. I'm a product of Indian River County, and I really could not be happier in such a wonderful, supportive district of the arts. It is, bar none, a cut above. So I hope you really enjoy our performance this evening. This is our chorus that meets twice a week in the morning, and these kids are always singing, and they did not stop the entire way here. So I hope you enjoy.
And just board, while the students get set up, if you notice the wonderful student in the headband about to walk by me, this is Yaneli Magdaleno. And she raised, and Fellsmere helped her raise, $2,000 and for the St. Baldrick's charity. And the way she was able to do that, I've seen the pictures and I posted them to the district's Twitter account today. She had these two very long, thick braids that used to come out of her hair. And she shaved those off for charity, and in the process raised over $2,000 for the St. Baldrick's Foundation. So now the Fellsmere Choir.
Stay
And now a brief video to highlight some current events that have been going on in the district. Recently, Oslo Middle School received a $20,000 STEM grant from Verizon Wireless that they're going to use to implement some STEM initiatives and classroom projects and some exciting stuff. And also, Storm Grove Middle School had a pep rally a couple weeks ago, again, to benefit the St. Baldrick's Foundation, where they had a couple brave teachers get their heads shaved during the pep rally. So this brief video.
On Tuesday, March 14th, Oslo Middle School was presented a check for $20,000 from Verizon Wireless as a part of a grant to enhance STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math programs for students.
The point of the grant is to spread the word about STEM careers and gain interest in STEM fields. So there's more students involved with science and math. So the grant was written to purchase basically STEM in a box activities.
With 80% of the future of the workplace being in STEM, science, technology, education, and math, since Oslo is doing so many great initiatives in this school, Verizon Foundation chose this school to continue their initiatives and all the wonderful things that they're doing with the children to propel them into the next generation as far as high school and then college-bound children.
The award reception also coincided with Pi Day, where students participated in activities related to pi, the mathematical constant.
Today is the perfect day for the Verizon representatives to come out and actually present us with the check, because today is March 14th, 2016, which is 3.14159 rounded up. So our advanced math classes, the STEM classes, and some technology students, along with National Junior Honor Society members, actually have put on this fabulous, behind you, Pi Day Carnival. And all of the students, which is an assignment for class, had to create a booth related to pi in some way. And the proceeds are actually going to the 8th grade for our 8th grade end of the year celebration and field trip.
Yeah! 4 years ago, we brought an event for St. Baldrick's, which raises money for childhood cancer research, to Indian River County. This year, Storm Grove Middle School has just been outstanding with their support, and they had a closed event here at the school, which is just so welcomed by St. Baldrick's and Indian River County, and we're very grateful for that.
St. Baldrick's is a wonderful organization that helps children's cancer research, and that's why I decided to shave my head in solidarity of all the children with cancer. They came to our school last year, and this is my first time doing it, and I want to be part of this to help the children. So we did this in front of the students to show our support with the children with cancer and to raise more money, show them involvement, so they'll see us as adults, they'll become stewards later on in life, to see everyone volunteering for them.
It's very exciting, kind of. It is overwhelming, but it's also exciting to see how they support people like this. And to my cousin, it was very dear to me, so seeing everybody almost made me tear up and stuff. It was very exciting, yeah.
It was really overwhelming. It was amazing to see the kids really recognize how important it is, and it's like kids helping kids stepping in. I mean, this is a pediatric cancer issue, and just them recognizing how important it is, and recognizing what the kids are going through and that they can actually do something to make a difference. It's amazing, very overwhelming.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Right now, we're at citizens' input, and the first speaker requesting to speak is it Benny Ryant? Thank you.
To the school board, school superintendent, my name is Pastor Benny Ryan, and I'm here to speak as to my opposition to the Confederate flag, allowing it to be on school campuses which I feel is under the guise of freedom of expression, freedom of speech. As a background, I was born August 10th, 1946. Thank God I'll be about 70 this year. The reason I said that, because I was born in a little small town called Sassa, Georgia. And my first day of school was a horrific experience because I had to go past a white school, and there was this big Confederate flag that was waving, and the kids shouted obscenities, racial slurs, and beside that, they threw rocks on me. Now, you can imagine your first day of school, what type of an experience that was. And immediately, this Confederate flag was embedded in my mind as to what I experienced. And from then on, every experience I had with the Confederate flag, it was negative. I won't go into it. And it appears all of a sudden I am to, like magic in my mind, change this emblem to one of freedom of expression. I find it very offensive. It's just as offensive to a black person as the Nazi flag, German Nazi flag, is to a Jew. And I'm sure if you have, any of you on this board have been offended the same way, you would not be so lax in your attitude about it. You would immediately try to take some type of action to make a change as far as allowing this flag on campus. Now, I hear some say, well, this is of historical significance. But I believe, according to 2 Corinthians 5:17, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things become new. I feel that there's a need for a change in Indian River County concerning the Confederate flag. I feel that the district itself has been very slow about trying to make changes, but I'm sure if one of the big money boys over there on John Island was offended, somebody be going up there to Tallahassee every day. I really believe that this should be removed, and I feel that this school board should take an action that is preventative and not wait around like I've seen with the traffic division, that you desire to have a traffic light, then after 4 or 5 people are killed, then they say, wait, we need a traffic light. We need to see what is happening, how this is affecting our black African-American kids in school, and take action to remove this Confederate flag. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Liz Cannon.
Good evening. I would like to share with you my letter of rebuttal for this year's evaluation. I'm writing this letter in rebuttal of my summative evaluation for 2014-15. Although overall I received a score of highly effective, I am writing this letter to express my condemnation of the use of the value-added model in my evaluation. The legislature has established this unfair requirement on the district to evaluate me based upon the use of a single flawed assessment, which not only do I not have the right to review, but also would stand to lose my certification if I attempted to do so. The VAM tracks the number of subject-relevant courses in which the students are enrolled, students with disability status, English language learner status, gifted status, attendance, mobility, difference from modal age and grade, class size, homogeneity of entering test scores in the class. These factors are quantified and put into a calculation to project a score that a student should earn. Unfortunately, the most quantifiable factor in student achievement, socioeconomic status, is not calculated into such a projection. Once these calculations are applied, they are compared to the student's actual scores, and anything above the projected scores is considered the value added by the teacher. This is an insult to every teacher who adds value to their students every single day. The value I add to my students is not quantifiable. Another reason I refute the use of these scores, particularly this year, is my belief that the comparison is invalid. In 2014-15, my students took the Florida Standards Assessment, an assessment based upon the Florida standards in the first year in which they were taught. The Florida standards are a cumulative set of standards requiring a significant amount of background knowledge. In some of the English language arts standards, there are 3 significant supporting factors that change just from 6th to 8th grade. That does not even include the variances from kindergarten to grade 5. In fact, the 8th graders for whom I have been measured had learned from 3 different sets of language arts standards in their educational careers: the Sunshine State Standards, the Next Generation Sunshine State Standard, and the Florida Standards. There is no way with our ever-changing standards that the students in 8th grade would have received all the background knowledge necessary to be effectively prepared for this test. Additionally, the projected growth is based upon growth from 2 different tests based upon 2 different sets of standards. This is clearly a case of comparing apples to oranges. The significant changes in the standards, style of the test, and extensive problems with the test administration make comparisons of these vastly dissimilar assessments an untenable source for evaluating teachers. The state even established guidelines against the use of these scores in decisions about students, but had no qualms in using these scores for teachers. I also believe the assessment to be invalid based upon the state's own audit by Alpine Testing Solution. In their report, they concluded that there was only a 64% match with the ELA standards. While they said it was good since it was more than half, in my classroom, that's a D. I can only rate the validity of the assessment based on these reports, again, as I'm not permitted to review them myself. The evaluation of teachers is based upon a single test score of students is utterly ridiculous. Each of my students demonstrates varying skill levels each and every day. A test score should be used to drive instruction, not diminish the value of the teachers provide their students. While I consider myself lucky to have been awarded an effective student performance score, I felt it necessary to refute this measure even being applied to my evaluation. The use of such arbitrary measures to evaluate any teacher is wrong. My students are more than a test score. I am more than a test score, and I add value to my students each and every day. Thank you,
Ms. Cannon. And thank you. Thank you so much. And we indulged because there was a letter here, and Mr. Bryant as well. We want everybody to have their thoughts. Just a little reminder, 3 minutes. We'll try to keep it. If you hear the buzzer go off, try to finish your thoughts. And thank you so much for that respectful use of time. The next person is Dr. Sylvester McIntosh. Thank you, sir.
A few months ago, I was awarded the Silver Star for things that I had done in Vietnam. I'm a native of Indian River County. I've lived here all my life, traveled all over the world, but we have a problem, and I expressed this with our superintendent, with hiring of teachers. My kids would not come back here after they graduated. Matt, some of them graduated with you and all that, would not come back to Indian River County because of the hiring practices. My daughter is the assistant state attorney in West Palm Beach. She do a lot of hiring and such as that. But when it comes to our system, it's broken. And you as board members, I hope that you would look into it and try to change some of the hiring practices, especially when it comes to minorities. Whether they are black or Latinos or whatever, our system is broken. And until we change that, we're going to have the same problems that we're having with the minority kids being much lower than the white kids. A second thing is that we, as a people, got to change our attitudes. If our attitudes are racist or we don't care about each other, when I jumped on those 3 grenades in Vietnam, the guys that was in the foxhole with me was white. It had nothing to do with the color of my skin. It's because I love people. But until we begin to love our kids, as we saw those kids of different colors and backgrounds, and we come together as a people, we're going to have the same old problem. So I'm saying to you, look into our system with this IR plan, where that a teacher can be promoted to a system, and that 1 year by 1 year contract, if I don't like it in a year, I can get rid of you. Our system is broken, and you are the bosses. You need to look into this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the next speaker is Valerie Bryant. Is it McIntosh? I'm sorry. Wilson, I'm sorry. Thank you so much.
Good evening. My name is Valerie Brant Wilson. I am a lifelong resident of Indian River County. I have taught in Indian River County over 35 years, and I don't want to say taught. My current position is a guidance counselor. And my topic tonight is about school climate. The reason why I have chose school climate is because of how at the Freshman Learning Center there was a flyer that was sent around. In our code of conduct, and I gave each one of you all, you adopted the code of conduct, therefore you know what you have approved. The first thing, if you look on page 7, where it said about core values, that our job is to foster positive climates that are safe, supportive, and engaging. If we're going to do that, I also work as a counselor, so therefore I do conflict resolution. The first thing you want to do is to make sure that the parties that are in, that have some discrepancy among themselves, is to try to find a way to resolve the advice of saying that the information received is it freedom of expression, the students have the right to express themselves. However, scope of employment, I'm not an attorney, but I do know that if we're going to build positive relationships among our students, we need to be in a preventive mode, not in a, as Pastor Bryant said, that we need to be in a preventive mode. And I'm going to take you over to page 9, where it says expectation of the students. And with the expectation of the student on page 9, going into page 10, number 4, treat others with respect and courtesy. Understand and recognize how conduct affects other students and school staff. If you were a child and you were on the school campus and you received this flyer as an African American student, you will be appalled to have this circulated in your face. It clearly says the South will rise again. My cotton needs a picking, and my tobacco needs a plowing. White is right, black is white. Therefore, we don't need this on our campuses. We need to be trying to foster a relationship wherein all students are going to be engaged in learning. That's our core principle here at Indian River County. As I exit, I'm getting ready to retire, so therefore I would love to see that Indian River County is in good hands. And don't forget that Emmanuel 9 was created because of this rebel flag. Please don't forget that, because you have volatile students who cannot. You and I may be able to give the rationale, but many students can't do that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're at the consent agenda, and the orders of the day adopted the consent agenda, moved item B from the consent agenda. This time, would anyone like to entertain a motion to approve consent agenda?
Approval of
Thank
consent
you.
agenda without
B.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. Thank you, Mr. Frost. Any discussion? Ms. Jimenez?
Yeah, I'd just like to congratulate the students that are going to Atlanta, Georgia, April 22nd to 26th to participate in the academic games. And we are also approving the girls rugby team to travel to Missouri in May. It's great to see our students engaged, and I'm glad that we're able to support these activities for our students.
Thank you. Any further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. 5-0, Ms. Sang. Item B. Mr. Searcy.
Yeah, I just have one sort of a technical question on the second, item number 7. Without the name, a person changed to retirement, entering drop on 3/16, 3/116, and exiting drop on 6/29. How does that happen? I mean, you get in, you get out, what's the deal? I don't understand it.
Dr. Fritz, are you prepared for that?
So there is a maximum period of time for drop, which is 5 years. However, a person does not need to remain for that full period of time, so they may enter drop at any time so long as they leave within that 5-year period. It appears, I haven't researched this issue because I wasn't made aware of it in advance, but it appears that this is an individual who is elected to enter drop on the date that's noted here and exit drop soon thereafter within the 5-year period, but a very short duration.
Can I just piggyback, or I believe, so if somebody reached retirement age, let's say in March, and/or time in service, they could, in essence, retire right now, but to finish the year, if they go and drop, then their dates drop, their retirement check certain will be based up until the March, and then from March to July, the contributions are put aside. So somebody could walk out on us and, in essence, retire right now. And I don't know this person. I'm just saying if that was their retirement date, they could leave now. But then there's the rest of the school year. So what they could do is put in for their retirement, and they'll get their retirement figured at March 16th
Yeah,
date.
it'll be based on that date.
And then the drop, you could go 1 day or 5 years. Most people usually do 5 years and do not add to their pension, but the money that was contributed is put aside, and they get that in a lump sum. Drop is, am I right about drop?
That's an accurate description of the way drop works, yes.
So I'm imagining, I can't speak for this person, like you said, but that person probably reached their date certain and then just wanted to,
Yeah, I could only speculate as to what this employee, why this employee is requesting what she did. Our office, if somebody asks us about it, we refer them to FRS to seek advice and information about what is the best decision for them. We don't advise in our office, but that's an accurate description of the way the drop system works. Some people stay the entire time, some people don't. This was a decision and a request of the employee.
It just looked a little strange to me. They get in on one date, and 3 or 4 months later, they get out. So when they say they're entering drop, they're entering that 5-year period of the
Deferred
drop
retirement
program?
Yes.
Okay.
This does look unusual. It's not typical. I think it's more typical for people to stay for the full 5 years, but it's an election of the employee and it's a request of the employee. It's not our decision.
Okay. It just looks strange, very strange. Thank you.
I agree.
any further? I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval. Second.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. Mr. Frost, any further? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0, Ms. Stang. Action item A, approval to purchase fine arts, career and technology, and Hope PE 9th grade instructional materials. Dr. Rendell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Action item A, we're seeking approval to purchase the instructional materials for fine arts, career and technical education, PE, Hope, and Hope PE 9th grade. These are the instructional materials we talked about at the previous meeting. We've had public hearings, had opportunity for the public to review these materials. The committee selected these materials, so we're asking your approval to go ahead and purchase these materials. The instructional materials, the total cost is $1.2 million.
Entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Thank you, Mr. McCain. Ms. Jimenez, thank you for your second. Mr. McCain, on your motion? Ms. Jimenez? Any further discussion?
Sure. Just to clarify that these materials are at the recommendation of the Instructional Materials Adoption Committee, which includes parents, teachers, and administrators?
Parents were invited to be a part of the process. In the backup, there are a list of the people that participated in the adoption process on the committees.
Thank you.
I have a question. And I'm sorry, it did not come to me till before this, but our charter schools, obviously we have our curriculum, and our charter schools, who is in essence a public school, do they have to follow this procedure? And how do we know that they do?
Well, I guess I don't know that we monitor how they choose their materials, but we do monitor their purchases, so the purchases have to be on an approved list.
Is there any way, because I know we have a liaison, is there any way that you can follow up and check with the charter schools and just see how their process or their timelines are? Or just as a courtesy, not as a, school board, requiring that, but maybe just so that we can answer that to our other constituents? Mr. Foss?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, this whole process is defined in statute, House Bill 874 from last session. So any public school, and as public schools, the public charters also fall under the adoption, so I would suspect that they're under the same onus, and the process is very similar. And as Dr. Rendell points out there, the materials are from a list that the district has approved. Is my understanding correct?
And just the reason is that, we get emails for charter schools for various reasons we've had recently. One recent was on a curriculum, a certain text they were using, and some controversy, and I just, coupled with this item, I just can't answer that question out forth in public. So if you could just ask that, would that be okay?
Yeah, we'll verify that and get information back to you.
That'd be great. Thank you. Any other?
Let me chime in on, I think Sean asked a question on the number of parents. I see 1 out of 44 people. The rest of them are all school administrators or employees.
We also advertised a public hearing. The materials were available upstairs for a period of time in accordance with statute. And notices were sent out that they were available for review.
There's nothing else. All those in favor? Aye. 5-0 Mustang. And that brings us to item B, the approval of the budget amendment. Dr. Rendell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This budget amendment is actually rather tricky, so Mr. Morrison and Mr. Green are going to present some information to you. So if you give them just a minute to turn the equipment on, they have a PowerPoint presentation with some information to share.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rendell. Before you board members, you should have a copy of this evening's PowerPoint. In addition, you should also have page 2 of 54 that was retrieved from the 2015-16 FEFP third calculation. And that's a document resembling this, and the Indian River School District on line 31 is highlighted for you. So on the first slide, the 2015-16 FEFP third calculation shows a decrease in revenue to the school district of $1.797 million, okay? K-12 unweighted FTE students, the 2015-16 second calculation is based on our projection. That is a projection that our schools provide to us. It's reviewed by a committee, submitted to the state. That's what the 15-16 budget was based on, okay? In October of 2015-16, when we do our first survey, Preliminarily, the reported FTE that came in was 17,319.72, and you will see that on the difference line on the report. So the district fell short by 372.91 FTE, and that's very important to remember. As a result of that, our budget decreased from $126,084,006 to $124,286,129, or as I said, the decrease of $1.797 million. Well, what happened? What's the reasons for this? We will go through and explain with you what happened in terms of the district did not make, obviously, our projected FTE count for the year. We had some reporting issues during the survey weeks, which we will get into detail with you. Approximately 170 less students were reported in the third calculation in October compared to the 2014-15 fourth calculation, which was the February count the year before. We're also seeing the continued impact of students taking part-time virtual courses, and we have some information to share with you on that, as well as the continued impact of the state's recalibration of the district's FTE. And you may recall that in 2012-13 thereabouts, the state decided that they were going to cap all FTE at 1 FTE. They're not going to pay for any more than that. So as I mentioned, the next slide shows that we lost 372.91 FTE as compared to what the projection was. That was here, 17,692.63 FTE versus what was reported in the survey.
As Mr. Morrison explained, we did not meet our projection was one of the first issues. So any projection above what we actually had that we did not meet would be a loss in FTE. Second, on page 4, slide 4, it's very important to understand that FTE, full-time equivalent, is based on scheduled minutes. The minutes that students are in particular courses and their schedules in the system for students that are in attendance for at least one day during the survey window, and that is important. Students, as you know, are not required to attend a full 7-period day. Students today are making many different choices in their schedule, and we're going to show you examples of that. Our previous attendance calculation or policy around daily attendance was based on an old system of assuming students should be in school for 7 periods a day. If they were not in school for 240 minutes or 5 periods a day, they would be counted as absent for the daily attendance. We had to go back after receiving this initial data and review and change our attendance calculation policy. We now have many students who may only be taking 3 periods with us, and the rest are online. 3 periods would be less than the 240 minutes. They were never showing up as a day present during the survey week. That ties back to some of those 170 students Mr. Morrison talked about as not being reported. They were actually here, but we got no credit for them because they were not being reported. So as a result, we have tweaked our attendance calculation for daily attendance to be based on a student appearing in 50% of his or her scheduled courses. So if you have 2 courses, you need to show up for 1, and you would be counted present. If you have 4 courses, you would need to show up for 2. That helps us capture those students who only are scheduled with 1, 2, or 3 periods in a day. Other minor things in a data correction, we get a 6-month window to correct data, or things like dual enrollment. There were conflicts with course numbers and section numbers, vocational courses where program numbers had to be changed, and the typical scheduling anomalies that we have each year as the state sends us back information saying maybe this particular room number and teacher doesn't match, and we go through a cleaning process for about 6 months. So based on that process, we are going to be able to recoup some of these lost dollars, and we'll talk about that as we go forward through our typical data correction process and through us tweaking the way we count daily attendance. The next slide is designed to give you an illustration in the difference between student count, or bodies, and FTE, funding for those bodies. Now, I have to give you a caveat. The green line is based on the 20-day count. It's data that we had readily available historically. Both data sets are for illustrative purposes. So in this example, it's for traditional public school, non-charter, just because we had two data sets to compare. The green line is our 20-day count. That's where the teachers counted every student and turned it in. We make staffing decisions on that 20-day count. We do class size projections on that 20-day count. We know how many students are sitting in the seats. And as you can see in 2010-11, 11-12, and 12-13, the student count is very similar to the red line, which is the FTE. Now, the FTE was on October on these dates, so we are talking about a month difference. But notice after 12-13, the red line starts dramatically decreasing while the green line stays the same or has smaller decreases. And if you end up on 2015-16, you will see a very bottom number of 15,110. That's an example of our traditional public school preliminary reported data when we had that other attendance policy in place and we had data corrections. We have gone back and gotten information from the state on, we will get a final report next month, but we've got preliminary information that we are going to get somewhere around 200 more FTE, and that is an estimate. We won't know that number until April. So actually we will get adjusted in April up to a new number, and that's where we will recoup some of that FTE. And it shows there the anticipated adjustment for traditional non-charter in this particular example.
So the next couple of slides are to illustrate the impact of students taking part-time virtual courses and the impact what it has on your FTE. So we pulled a student, we named the student Student 1, and we showed the student's schedule in a traditional brick and mortar setting for 2 semesters. So you have Survey 2, which is your October count, and Survey 3, which is your February count. And as you can see, the student has 7 courses full day, and for the first semester we get the 0.4998, and in the second semester we receive the other half of the FTE, so we get funded for a full FTE. This student is not taking any virtual courses, regular attendance in classes.
So if you could stay on that slide for a second.
Oops, sorry.
So you'll see the FTE is split in half. We get half the credit for the student in the first semester and the other half of credit for the student in the second semester. Because the student is registered and taking 7 classes, we get full FTE. So to, 0.49888 and then the 0.5002. So in class all day in brick and mortar equals a full FTE.
The change that happened with recalibration is illustrated with this particular student who has 2 virtual courses in the first semester, or Survey 2, and I believe 4 virtual classes in Survey 3. Historically, we would still have gotten our 1 full FTE because they were with us the 300 minutes or more, the 7 periods, and the virtual school would have gotten their FTE. But that equates to more than the 1.0. And in the funding mechanism that changed, called recalibration, they've said, no, you're going to only have to share the 1 FTE funding proportionally based on the number of minutes you serve the student and the number of minutes someone else serves the student. Could be another district or a virtual. In this example, at the bottom, you see that we have 7 periods in both semesters, but as a result of those virtual classes, we are only receiving 0.77 of that FTE. So we lose a quarter of the FTE because we have to share that within that time with the virtual school.
So this is a student who's taken a full 7-period day with us and then taking some additional online courses. And because they're taking additional online courses, we're not receiving full funding for the student. That's part of recalibration. Ms. Jimenez.
Yeah, so what happens if we look at the second half of that, and that student is taking 11 classes, 3 AP plus physics, digital design, pre-calculus, a language, Spanish 4 honors. What happens if that student doesn't pass those virtual school classes? Do we get, I mean, how does that work? Do we still have to pay for it? Or do we just not know? Is all of this reported to us?
That's a very good question. You'll notice you'll see some zeros on some of those because they have not yet completed the course. The virtual school does not get paid until the summer, till the end, when they get a completer. And that is also a very important point to understand why our budget fluctuates during the year, because as students complete, they are adjusting the budget, and you won't know until the very end of the year what your final budget was for the beginning of the year, because those students, Florida Virtual does not get paid unless they complete the course.
And just to clarify, we don't pay for that. We just don't receive the funding. So we would receive less funding once they complete a course.
And we also understand that students have to take at least one virtual course to graduate today. So this is an example of where they had 2 in the first semester and some in the second semester.
And just as a follow-up, because I moved on to page 8 because the list there is even longer.
Right.
How realistic is it for a student to take that many classes at any given time? I mean, is there any control whatsoever? That it just seems almost, you know, how do you do that? 13 classes, 14
The
classes?
statute says we cannot be a barrier to that. They have implemented acceleration, they've implemented virtual, so there are many options for students, and you'll probably notice the coursework that these students are in. Some of these are advanced students. They are working at night as if it was a job for many of them, and they're taking very rigorous, full academic loads of courses.
Would it be safe to say also that a lot of students who maybe need some grade forgiving from
Absolutely.
9th and 10th or 11th are now pounding down to water down? I shouldn't say water down, but the more courses they take and the better they get at the virtual will
We
then
also have middle
raise-
school students who are taking virtual because they need to complete all of their core courses to get out of middle school. So they take that maybe in their 8th grade year. They could be taking algebra online. The page 8 that Ms. Jimenez spoke to is an example. If you look at the first semester, you'll notice our high school is only the first 4 records. So the student was with us 4 periods times 50 minutes, which is 200 minutes. That's less than the old 240. That student we did not get credit for in that preliminary. That's why we changed our attendance policy to say, as long as he or she shows up for 50% of those 4 courses, 2 out of the 4, that student would be present for the day. And we've confirmed that with the state. Many districts have moved to a different attendance policy because they were losing FTE for students who weren't there a majority of the day. So that first student, first semester, we got no credit for them whatsoever. But because we have tweaked our attendance calculation formula, we now have gotten credit for those 4. You will notice at the bottom, we're only going to receive a 0.56 FTE for this student. We've seen students as low as 0.38 FTE. They're with us 7 periods a day, same amount of technology, teachers, classrooms, support. So that's an impact. We wanted to give you a visual representation of the continued impact of recalibration on the funding and the budget.
So would it be safe to say that the amendment, the bad news on the amendment is based on the 372.91, but at a later date, there'll be an amendment back the other way to recoup up to 200, you said?
That is our estimation that we will receive prior to recalibration, roughly around 294. After recalibration, we don't know what that will come from the state. In addition, don't forget that the General Appropriations Act caps the budget. So if now the state has to come up with more money because we're reporting more FTE, we may be looking at a proration at that point. So in about next month, we should be receiving the corrected reports recouping the majority of that FTE that was not reported in the survey in October. Now, when you look at our budget, you may recall back in June 23rd to be exact, on slide 23, we went back and we extracted the information regarding what we had set aside to protect ourselves from the impact of recalibration. We set aside the dollars that were necessary for growth should we not meet our projection. We also set aside dollars for the absolute deviation in the FTE recalibration model. So the impact, the reserve in the budget was $1.8 million. On the sheet that you have from the FEFP conference report, it reflects the adjustment of $1.797 million. So that's why you will see the loss of revenue on the budget amendment, as well as knocking out the appropriations to counteract that. So we protected ourselves in looking forward, in looking ahead, to make sure that we didn't have to absorb a $1.7 million shock. And as you mentioned, the good news is that with the corrected reports that went in, we should recoup the majority of that.
And just finally, we will not recoup those recalibration effects. Those are the losses that we continue to see from year to year, and we continue to see that gap widen between the number of students and the FTE we get.
Well, I would have to commend Carter Morrison in his calculation within, I'm not even that good of math, it's 0.5% you calculated, but I would say kudos to you, Carter Morrison, for commanding that reserve amount, because it was, spot on. So I do have to say, Dr. Rendell, your staff's fantastic.
I have a question. This is not pertinent to this right now, but we've been talking about recalibration for quite a few years now, and we continue to see the impact. And this morning or this afternoon, we had our legislative report. Are school districts at all talking about, or is anyone talking about approaching this from a legislative angle and going up to Tallahassee and advocating for fairness around this issue? Is that something that anyone is willing to tackle, or is it just impossible?
Not that I'm, sorry, my apologies.
Mr. Morrison, you can go first, and then I'll wrap it up.
I was going to say, not that I'm aware of, however, it could be up to the board to add that to their legislative platform for 16-17.
The Superintendent's Association did have some initial discussion about this at one of our conferences, but the recalibration was not something they were willing to put on a legislative agenda or anything that they wanted to pursue. A couple points I want to make before we move for approval or on this item. If you look at slide 5, page 5, and you see the green bars and the red bars, the red bars really start to diverge or move away from the green bars when recalibration started. And what we're seeing is the two main culprits for us for recalibration are the way we're taking attendance and the number of virtual courses our students are taking. So we've addressed the way that we're taking attendance to make sure that we're getting credit for the students we do have in our classrooms. But we're also entering into that virtual franchise with Florida Virtual. So those payments will now stay in-house. In other words, if we are teaching those online courses, the students in the different examples that we're taking as many as 4 online courses, if they're in our franchise, then we will receive the funding for those students for that period of time. So we're trying to address the difference between the green and the red line, in other words, address the recalibration by making sure we're getting accurate counts as to who's actually in our buildings for the time we have them scheduled. And if they're taking a virtual course, why not take that virtual course through our franchise, because then we would keep the funding for that class.
Do they have choice in terms of which virtual franchise they choose, because you can't control choice?
So when they register, and I can ask Dr. Arnett to come up if we want to get technical, but when they register for a virtual class, if it's on our list to be offered, they're automatically going to be enrolled in one of our classes.
Also, don't we hit a break even at 8, so we actually suggest the regular FLVS if we're not at 8, because
correct.
Then we
the
actually
break
lose
even
money.
point, correct. If we don't have at least 8 students, then we're actually paying the teacher to teach more. It's more to pay the teacher than we're going to get in returned FTE. Correct.
All right.
So with that, we seek your approval for the budget amendment.
I have a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you, Ms. Jimenez. Thank you, Mr. McCain. Any further discussion?
Just thank you for the clarification.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0, Ms. Snag. Item C, approval to increase purchase order to Banyan Contractors for concrete repairs for the Vero Beach High School Citrus Bowl Stadium project. Dr. Rendell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Approval is requested to increase the purchase order issued to Banyan Contractors for concrete repairs at the Vero Beach High School Citrus Bowl Stadium. The original, so far we've paid $48,350 due to unforeseen conditions. We estimate the remaining repairs to be about $75,000, so the total cost would be $125,000. So we're seeking approval for that.
Do I have a motion?
Move approval.
Thank you, Mr. McCain.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Jimenez. Mr. McCain, on your motion. Ms. Jimenez?
Yes, can we have an explanation of the unforeseen conditions that required this adjustment?
I think Mr. Morrison had Mr. Sanders here to answer that question.
Good evening, everyone. We've talked about the seats that the concrete bleachers rested on in the past. Tried to explain it. I was telling Mr. Morrison earlier, if you could see it, it would take about 5 seconds to understand, but I'll do the best I can. The raker beams, the ones that are on the angle that create the A, they have seats, about 25 seats per beam for roughly around 200 total resting spots where those seats used to provide the support. Each one of those seats had a metal plate that had steel rods that went down into the cast beams so that when the bleachers rested on them, the bleachers also had metal plates, and those were then welded together. When we removed those old concrete bleachers, we had to cut those apart, and we knew we were going to find some amount of corrosion. Didn't know how much because they were covered up by the concrete seats. So what happens is when those seats corrode in those bars that protrude down into the cast concrete, when that corrodes and deteriorates, it allows water penetration down into the concrete beams themselves and gets into the steel that actually provides some of the structural support. So when we got everything removed and we could see it, what we determined was we had to chip away those beams, or those seats, cut away that corroded steel, pour it back with a more dense grout, and then epoxy coat it so that we don't allow that water intrusion in the future to make its way down into the concrete and further corrode the internal steel that provides the structural support for the beams that are remaining in place. Again, 5 seconds if you could see it, but me trying to explain it sounds complicated.
Yeah, thank you. I know you had explained that to us at a workshop, but I think it's important when we see these changes that for the public that's not able to attend the workshops, understand that when we have these projects, sometimes you can make your best estimate in terms of a budget, but there may be unforeseen issues that come up that may make the project more expensive. So it's just important, I think, from a place of transparency, especially because we've been talking so much about the Citrus Bowl. It's just important to get that clarification, so thank you for repeating it.
Any further? Mr. Searcy.
Question. Was this $48,350, was that a contract? Was it a bid project? Or how did we get with this Banyan Contractors to do that job?
It was. We had
It's a
our
contract?
It's a purchase order. It's an agreement based on a set of documents that our architect put together for us. But again, a lot of the unforeseen conditions, no one could determine until we actually had the seats removed.
They only missed it the increase 2.5 times what his original bid was. Golly, that's weak. That's weak. That's all I got.
Is the change order on us or on them?
On us or on them was?
Yeah, we requested the change order?
Well, we requested the work be done. The initial hope was that when we removed those bleachers, we could sandblast those steel seats and they'd be in good enough condition that we could just paint them. When we actually saw it, the structural engineer that we had on site said that there was enough corrosion that had made its way down in. He was unable to determine how far down in After we did a little bit of exploration and chipped a few of those out, we found that it was 2, 3, 4 inches in some places. So because of what we found, we determined we had to do it all. So that was the increase.
Okay, so I just want to be clear that it wasn't Banyan.
No, it was not
And
Banyan.
I just wanted-
Banyan asked
okay.
us in advance, do you want this done? Our engineer said, you have to, or you risk corroding the internal steel of the existing concrete.
Thank you. Any further, go ahead.
And we've already done the work, right?
We have done a good portion of the work, yes.
Was that a, oh, okay, thank you. All those in favor? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? 5-0, Ms. Stang. Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make a couple comments on some newspaper articles that have been out and about. Sometimes you can't believe everything you read in the paper. There was an article about EarPlan recently in the paper. EarPlan is a professional development program, a training program for teachers who want to pursue a career in administration. And the ACLU had written a letter or issued a press release based on their review of documents relating to EarPlan that it was not being administered properly and that it was being used as a filtering system to prevent some of our employees from advancing. They made statements in the article and in their press release that EarPlan was mandatory, that you had to participate in EarPlan before you could be considered for appointment as an assistant principal. That's incorrect. EarPlan is an optional voluntary program that you can participate in if you want to learn more about what's expected, what's required to be an assistant principal. There are also parts of the program that help you prepare to become an assistant principal. So it would be suggested if you wanted to become an assistant principal that you'd participate in a program like that, but it's not required. It's not a filtering mechanism or anything like that. So I did meet with members of the ACLU and explain that to them just yesterday, and they said that they had incorrect information. That's not going to change the newspaper article that's out there. Oftentimes we don't get corrections or retractions and that kind of thing. There's also been some chatter on social media about the incident that was described a little bit earlier today that happened at the Freshman Learning Center a couple weeks ago, where some students generated some flyers that were completely 100% inappropriate, unacceptable. The chatter on social media was that we had not done anything to correct that behavior or address that behavior, and that is absolutely 100% incorrect. We addressed the situation very quickly and have issued severe consequences to the students that are involved in that. The generation of those flyers and the material on those flyers was not an example of freedom of speech, and it was treated as not an example of freedom of speech. It was treated as something that was unacceptable and would not be tolerated. And so there have been issued some pretty severe consequences. Law enforcement was involved in that investigation of that incident. So unfortunately, we don't always have the ability to go out and correct misinformation, whether it's in print media or social media, but since I have the floor for a few minutes, I thought I'd take the opportunity to do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Nothing under discussion. I believe we're up to board matters. Why don't we start with Mr. Searcy, since
That's a good idea right there. Thank you, ma'am. I just, while the gentleman is here, could we get some sort of an update on the business at the Fellsmere School? I'm sure that he probably could give us I went up there and looked at it this weekend, and it's a sad deal, but maybe you can explain to me where we are, who's paying for it, because I'm sure you're going to hear something about it in the next day or two, so it'd be better for us.
I'm sure Mr. Sanders would be able to give you an update on the situation, the contracting work that's been done recently. So, Scott, if you could come to the podium and talk about basically the stucco repairs and that issue.
What we found at Fellsmere, I'll go from the present, work back in time. What we have is a delamination of the stucco on the concrete block that was used to build the walls. What that allows to happen is the minor cracks that you see in your stucco houses and in some of our buildings, those do provide a place for water to make its way in, but as long as the stucco is adhered to the block, it kind of stops right there, it dries out, it doesn't make its way in the building. But when the stucco turns loose from the block and creates a void between the stucco layer and the block itself, that gives time for that water to absorb into the block, run down, and make its way into the interior of the building, right where the block actually rests on the slab. The reason that the building is coming up on 2 years old and this is just now happening is because buildings take a little bit of time to settle in. You know, that's the term that you hear is the building is settling. Well, there's a lot that goes on in the settling. It's not necessarily a shifting downward, but it's also a continued curing of the concrete. Stucco is a cementitious product, and it cures over time. So what happened was the very small places where the stucco had delaminated from the walls, they expanded and finally revealed themselves as the source of our leaks. We checked a lot of different sources as the water was starting to come in. We first looked at the roof, of course. We looked around the vents. We looked around pipes. We looked around the actual meeting of the concrete slab to the blocks. We did some pressure tests on the windows. We did a lot of things to try to find out where this was coming from. And we found a few things that we patched up, and the water stopped for a little while, and then it came back, and that was that increased delamination. So what we had the contractor do as a matter of workmanship and warranty, it's at no cost to us, was come back and do a thorough investigation. If you were out there, you probably saw the big lift that they had in place. They went all over the entire building with a full crew and did soundings, tappings. They removed some places as an exploratory investigation. They took some of the beads off. They tore stucco off around the windows. And it was quite extensive. It went all the way, in some places up to the roof, some places all the way down to ground level. But everywhere there was any amount of uncertainty, that stucco was removed and replaced. A bonding agent went back on. It's kind of a glue that creates even a stronger hold than the stucco itself creates. We have a meeting actually tomorrow morning with the contractor. We've got the lift there. The subs will be there. The members of physical plant will be there. And we're going to make sure that all the places that were identified, and if there's any additional places identified while we're there doing our investigations, those are all addressed before the final paint goes on.
And I'm sure you probably don't have a crystal ball, but will that eliminate the mold and mildew from getting inside of the building, or I mean that's speculation, I know, but
well,
will it help?
To my knowledge, we don't have any mildew having been reported. We did have one spot of mold. Now that mold, I think you might or might not have been briefed on that. The mold itself wasn't created by the water that was being allowed in the building. Typically takes at least a 48-hour period for mold growth to start due to water intrusion into a building. So each one of these incidents of the water coming in because of the delaminated stucco, that was cleaned up immediately upon being found. So that didn't create any mold growth. The one instance of mold growth was due to an impermeable surface, like a marker board in this particular instance, being placed immediately up against the exterior block wall that didn't allow the circulation of the conditioned air to keep that dry and to keep it conditioned. It stayed wet back there, it stayed warm back there, it wasn't able to circulate. Typically, if we have some of our maintenance staff put a marker board up or an impermeable surface, like maybe a laminated poster or something to that effect, they put them up with spacers so that there's at least a 3/4 inch gap between that impermeable surface and the wall itself. That keeps that airflow circulating. But when a marker board is put up without those spacers, it creates a condition for mold to grow. And it was smaller than a 4x4 section. We had a remediation firm come in, remove it, test some of our ductwork, and everything was checked out clean.
I did see some mold on the outside of the building down near the grass level, I guess. But
on the north side of that building, probably find that at your house or my house. North sides of the building, they don't get the sunlight to kill off the algae, and that's what that actually is algae. Stays damp even on hot days. It's just a good place for algae to take hold.
But I guess the thing that I wanted to make sure that folks know is that the contractor is paying for all of that.
Correct.
All of those adjustments. One other piece on that, whenever we do the Beachland School over there, could we figure out some way to have an architect that can figure out what color he wants to paint the buildings? I mean, like this building and all the new ones that I see, they're all splotched, I guess. And it would be nice to have our buildings that we're building at these schools to be sort of look like the other buildings that are there. just a thought, and Mr. Superintendent to take care of.
I'm sure we'll look at different versions of landscape design for that.
Although this is Mr. Searcy's matters, since Mr. Sanders is at the podium, Ms. Jimenez would like to ask a question.
Yeah, it's just a follow-up, so just to make sure I understood correctly, there are no mold problems at Fellsmere Elementary due to the issues that we had with the delamination of the stucco. There was only a minor mold problem due to the lack of spacers when a marker board was put on a wall. And that little bit of mold is what is generating all of this sensationalism in the media. Is that an accurate assessment of what's happening here?
Don't know what's generating the media frenzy, but you're correct in what you said. The water intrusion due to stucco has not created any mold growth. The only mold in the building at Fellsmere was due to the marker board being placed immediately up against the wall.
And that has been taken care of?
And that has been taken care of.
Maybe you can answer that.
I wanted to be recognized.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sanders, when you say water intrusion, are we talking about water that you stand in which is knee deep? Are we talking about water that you could clean up with a piece of tissue?
I use a coin. If you can throw a nickel down and it's covered up, that's a puddle. We haven't been able to cover a nickel up with the depth of the water that we found coming in the walls.
Mr. Frost?
Yes. And you said 4 by 4, is that feet, inches?
4 feet by 4 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Just a little bit smaller than the board itself.
Behind the erase.
I think it was a 4 foot by 5 foot board.
And I'm going to piggyback all the questions and just one more thing. And can you tell us about the monitoring that not only do we not have mold, except for the one instance, but we also have systems in place to monitor for mold?
Not specifically mold, but we monitor the conditions that create mold. All of our buildings have a building automation system that ties in directly to our support services that is monitored every day. We have devices in place that monitor and report humidity levels and temperature levels, the functioning of equipment. So anytime that our humidity gets above 60%, that's typically where we start being concerned about mold being generated or being able to grow. Again, it takes about 48 hours for that to happen, but alarms are sent back to our monitoring technicians that immediately relay that as a work order to our HVAC and field technicians that go see, do we have a problem with the thermostat? Do we have a problem with a box in the ceiling? Why are we getting these alarms? So yes, we do have a monitoring system in place that monitors the conditions that would create mold.
Mr. Searcy, thank you for bringing that up. Do you have any other issues?
I just had one other, nothing on you, Scott, you're free to go.
Thank you.
I did have one other thing. I've been inundated by calls on this deal we handled a couple of weeks ago with this Coach Joe. And I know it's superintendent's responsibility, but I don't know if this board was aware of the letter from the state's attorney's office that we were not given when we made our decision. And I've discussed it with the superintendent. But based on what I saw there, I think that the superintendent maybe should relook at that item. I think we may be trying to eliminate the wrong folks. If that information that was in that letter from the state's attorney's office should have been provided to this board before we made a decision, and if it was not, shame on the folks that didn't bring it to us, not you, Mr. Superintendent, because in my discussion with you, you had not seen the letter, and that was about a week ago, I think.
That's correct.
And the letter was written back December the 14th, and not only does it indicate that the young person, or actually the old person, it was a relatively older student that sort of caused the ruckus, had these massive referrals, and we had a person with an unblemished record that we're pushing real hard to get terminated. And it looks to me like we were wrong in that. So I'd just like for the superintendent to take another look at it, and we ought to put the guy back to work tomorrow. But that's my opinion, and it's your job now. But it sure is disappointing to see what we have done to, or are going to be doing, I guess, to an individual with an unblemished record when we look at a very blemished record of the person that really caused the action. So that's my matters. I'm sorry.
Mr. McCain. Ms. Jimenez.
Thank you. And on that note, would it be possible, Dr. Rendell, for all the board members to get a copy of said letter so we know what this is about? Is it a public record that?
Yes, it's a public record.
It's an in-house communication in the state attorney's office. It was not a letter sent to us. It was not a letter addressed to us. It was a letter from one employee at the state attorney's office to another. But I have a copy of the letter, so I can make sure everyone gets a copy.
But the school district did not have that letter
Correct.
here. Okay, so
Yes,
it
ma'am.
wasn't withheld by any staff. It was a letter they had there that we hadn't seen.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I was confused. It seemed like someone had it and we never saw it, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't misinterpreting. Today has been a really busy day here at the school district. The board has been meeting since 9:30 this morning. We had a very interesting workshop today on the insurance issues in the school district. As many of you know, we have been struggling with being a self-funded school district. We opened up a clinic that our employees are benefiting from tremendously in order to try to curtail expenses, but we continue to struggle to make ends meet, if you will, in terms of being able to continue to be self-funded. So that workshop was really the starting point of a conversation that will allow the district to come closer to making the best decision that it can in terms of being able to be self-funded, serve employees to the best of our ability while maintaining the fiscal integrity of the school district. One of the things we talked about was the possibility of no longer being fully funded, and the impact to our employees would be just astronomical. So I think just knowing that the school district is having these conversations, looking at alternatives, should be reassuring to our staff, because I'm sure as these conversations progress, you will be hearing things, and it's important to just talk about it openly to avoid misinterpretations of what is going on. We also had a wonderful presentation about a transition program that we are looking at for our students from Owasso School using dollars from, is it Workforce?
Adult
That we have
education,
not
right.
used, and I'm just very encouraged to see Dr. Ferrantino and his staff being proactive in finding ways to use those dollars. We also had a legislative conference report, and as usual, we are still trying to figure out what the implications are policy-wise and budget-wise in terms of compliance with the mandates coming from Tallahassee. There are some good bills that are helpful to students. There are some that are challenging to school districts, and we'll be getting into a lot of those details later on as our attorney moves forward and recommendations are made for policy changes and whatnot. And we've also continued our conversations with the NAACP. Today, we had speakers talking about the concerns we have about race issues in our schools. This is not just something in Indian River County. We're having issues around race and intolerance and disrespect all over our nation. But what happens in our schools is one of the few things that we can control. And although we did respond quickly to this situation with the flyer at the Flick that was mentioned earlier, we still have an ongoing issue around the appearance of the Confederate flag in our schools. There are students driving to schools with flags on their cars, and there have been allegations of students wearing T-shirts with the Confederate flag. And even though we live in a country where we have a right to a freedom of speech, my rights in some ways are tempered by where your rights begin. And so I really look forward to the conversations that this board and this school district is going to have in terms of how we handle the issue around the Confederate flag specifically, because it would be very disingenuous to think that for an African American or a black student in our schools to have to look at a Confederate flag with the history that it has for black people in this country, to think that there is no impact is, to me, unbelievable. And what can we do? What can we do? We can't control the community, but we can control the school climate and the way we handle these situations. So, you know, I've been receiving calls, I've seen the Facebook posts, I have heard people out of the state actually talk about what's going on in this particular instance. And I would just say to the community, the board is hearing those concerns, and I am hoping as one board member that we will have that conversation and figure out ways to avoid this type of affront to some students by others, and often it's done out of ignorance, because we are seeing in our schools a replication of the way adults are misbehaving and disrespecting each other. So I applaud those of you who continually keep us on our toes and share your concerns with us, because our job is to listen and to work with our staff and with our superintendent to make sure that all students in this school district are treated with respect, and that it is modeled by everyone, including our staff and our leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Foss?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one thing. Board Member Jimenez already mentioned the academic games. As a former competitor and coach, we often hear about we had the girls basketball team here that were state champions. We hear about athletic success. You know, those of us who were a little on the more academic side of things, you know, the mathletes, if you will. It's great that we're able to have these opportunities to attend national academic games. And I'd like to thank the 2 teachers and the 2 parents who have given up their time to chaperone. And I wish the students a great deal of success, and I hope you bring home the hardware. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank everybody in the audience who did come, those that spoke. We do appreciate your coming. It's raining. We appreciate you coming out. You can make a difference, and I thank you for coming. The Autism Awareness Month begins in April, but this weekend, April 2nd, at Sebastian River High School, the baseball team is kind of minding some games. Are you in any? I'm in a game. I'm on a softball team. But it's for Autism Good Cause, and then it will be followed by a movie in the evening, sort of a drive-in type movie at the baseball field Saturday night. So please come out and support it. You can look on the website for that information. I do want to thank staff for a very productive day. Again, those, the Magic of Disney, you put together a few slides. It looks condensed and easy, but I know that's a lot of work, a few weeks worth of work or ongoing work. So thank you so much for all your work and input. That is hard to put together and present to us and try to let us digest it very quickly. So it's, but a good job in doing so. So it was a great day and very productive. And I do have to comment on this social climate in general. It is a shame that we live in a world that we have to worry about athletes preying on the football or baseball field and things like that. And it is a shame. And in the earlier meeting, like I said, I get ACLU emails, and they boasted about, we're suing in North Carolina, like it's a great thing that they're suing. So although we're respectful and we understand things, and people, there are people very passionate about their prayer and passionate about issues, we have to cautiously make sure that we're not putting the school into jeopardy. So we do move fast. We do have a code of conduct. We have acceptable and unacceptable behavior, and the school district, and I will thank Dr. Rendell for acting promptly and for the situation being handled. And as he said, law enforcement called in. But it is just a sad commentary that we live in these times, and hopefully better heads will prevail and will make positive and good behavioral changes in our district if we work together. And I think today in our afternoon meeting, we got to hear from people, and I know this board is committed to making those healthy changes for our community.
Madam Chairman, could I say one thing? I got an email the other day from one of the staff members, and I'm not sure if it was a joke or what, but I think we have a new dock in one of our...
Yes, if you would like to introduce the new doctor in town?
I'm not sure. I just saw the little postcard thing, but I think that it's very important to recognize Andy Reinberg for achieving that status, and maybe the superintendent might have been going to say something about it. Fantastic. And that's a raise in pay too, right? I don't know about that, but that's up to you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Anything else?
I'm good.
That being said, meeting adjourned.